What's up, guys? This is Lindsay with Garage Gym Reviews. Today we are going to talk about this piece behind me. It is a vertical hip glute machine. Now, this is from Gronk Fitness, and truth be told, I never used a vertical hip thrust machine before. I am somebody who actually really doesn't like hip thrusts, even though I do them on the weekly because I am all about that glute growth. I'm trying my hardest over here. But honestly, I am used to just using a regular hip thrust machine or a barbell and a bench doing a hip thrust kind of the old-fashioned way. So this is my first time being exposed to a vertical machine like this. Now, I did go on TikTok because I am cool despite what my kids say, and I saw a lot of gym girlies using this vertical hip thrust machine, so I was kind of curious how it compared to a horizontal hip thrust machine. But before we continue talking specifically about this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Also, if you want to go ahead and purchase this, use the link below, the like button. And lastly, this was sent to us by the company. However, that doesn't change my opinion about it. I'm always transparent about my reviews, so let's talk about it. Let's start out with some positives about this machine. It is a smaller footprint. So a lot of the times when we see like a hip thrust machine specifically, it's going to take up a pretty lengthy footprint, which is just not great for home gym owners. Or if you're going to a commercial gym and have a fancy hip thrust machine, I mean, they do take up a lot of space. Even when you are doing hip thrusts by yourself, like, you do have to have a pretty significant length of space as well as width because you are using the entire barbells. So if you are somebody who wants to do hip thrusts at their house but you are limited on space, this is definitely a good option to do because of its vertical design. The entire thing is 48 inches in length, 46 inches tall, and then 43 inches wide. Now, it does come with a commercial grade powder coating on an 11 gauge steel. It does feel pretty durable. I do think this will last you a very long time because of that powder coating, so you don't really have to worry about like the elements if you are in a non-climate controlled garage. Now, one thing I do really like about this are the foot pedals on it. It's actually a fixed angled foot pedal, which is really comfortable when you are going to that vertical standing position. It is painted with a non-slip paint, which I felt like was generally pretty grippy. When I was using the machine, I didn't notice any sort of like foot faltering. I was obviously able to adjust my feet where they needed to be, but as I was actually using it, my foot stayed in place right where it needed to be. This machine is also designed with pivot bearing, meaning that the rotation of the machine is just incredibly smooth. There was no sort of like hitching or sticking points as I was going from a seated to a vertical position. And really, I think that that's what you are looking for. If you are going from a seated to a standing position, obviously you don't want any sort of like extra hard tension points or any points that catch. You want it to be a smooth transition so that it's working that full range of motion, it's working those muscles all the way throughout, and that you're not getting stuck working extra hard in one point. This machine has a maximum load weight capacity of 330 pounds. Now, that actually surprised me because I've seen plenty of girls, plenty of guys in gyms, or even come over to my house who can do a hip thrust at 330 pounds, if not heavier. So the fact that it only does go up to 330 pounds was a little bit surprising to me. Now, this does come with resistant pegs so that you can easily use resistance bands with the machine. Now, one thing I do want to call out about this is the sleeves are actually a little shorter. So they're around 7 inches. Now, this is significantly shorter than what we see with something like a barbell. And that matters because if you are only using bumper plates at your garage, but you want to go up to that 330 pound load weight capacity, like, you might have trouble fitting all of those bumper plates on the sleeve. You definitely want to make sure that you have something like calibrated plates or iron plates that are a little thinner, and that way you can load more weight onto this machine. The overall cost of this machine is $1,299. That actually feels a little steep to me, and this is why. I did a quick Google search, found a lot of vertical machines. One in particular was from Amazon. It was only $300, and it had a max load weight capacity of 660 pounds. Now, that machine could be absolute trash. I haven't used it. I don't know much about it. It had decent reviews, but again, I actually haven't used it, so who knows? However, there were plenty of machines that are around an $800 to $900 mark that had a higher load weight capacity or around at least the 330 pounds. So I would say maybe shop around, do a little bit more comparisons, because I think what you are doing, and this is what we do with everything, is you are paying a little bit for the brand name. So obviously, if you followed football for a while, you know him, right? Like, he's coming out with a lot of equipment. Now, one thing that is interesting, right? You're paying for the Gronk name. However, anywhere on here does it say Gronk? No, like we didn't even realize it was a Gronk machine at first because there was no branding on the actual machine. So I do think that's a little interesting. Probably what they do is have a manufacturer that manufactures a machine like this and sends them to multiple brands. Now, when I looked on the website, this machine did have Gronk Fitness on it. So maybe it was just a mishap that we got a machine without the Gronk name on it. But just keep that in mind in case you do order this, get one without the Gronk name. You might not be the only one. Now, if you are used to using a typical hip thrust machine or barbell hip thrust, like this is going to feel quite different. Like really at first, I didn't actually like it. I felt like it was engaging my quads a lot more than it was my glutes. I read a couple things about it, watched a couple tutorials, and I realized there was a couple things I was doing wrong. So one thing when you are using a vertical hip thrust machine is make sure you aren't fully sitting down in between your reps. You want to leave a little bit of space between your bottom and then the seat. The other thing is make sure you are absolutely squeezing those glutes at the top of that hip thrust, giving it a good pause before you go ahead and add on another rep. Now, I will say this definitely engaged my quads a little bit more than I am used to with typical hip thrusts, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I definitely felt it in my glutes once I started using a little bit better form and got the rhythm of it, but it does burn up your quads a lot more than what I would say a typical hip thrust machine does. When it comes to the handlebars, I felt like they were actually really well placed. Me at 5'4" was able to use them comfortably. Nathan, Brandon at 6 foot were able to use the handlebars really comfortably. So overall, I think that this fits a variety of height. In terms of comfort, I felt like the vinyl padding on it was incredibly comfortable. There were no points during it where I felt like the padding was really rubbing into like the back of my calves, which I have experienced with some machines, or that the padding on my thighs felt too much or too intense. Like overall, this was a really comfortable machine to use. I don't have any really major call outs to it. I mean, if you are looking for a vertical machine, I say this is actually a really good one. My 1.5 major hang up on this is one, it is expensive. It's again, $1,299. And I do think that when you look at the market, it is on the higher end of that spectrum with a lower weight capacity. And then my half call out is, again, we just didn't get the Gronk name on it, which is kind of a bummer. Okay, so, and then this is my opinion, in my opinion alone. You might have a different opinion, and let me know in the comments. I feel like the benefit of a vertical hip thrust machine is saving on space. I don't think it adds any extra value than a typical hip thrust. I actually prefer a typical hip thrust machine. I do feel like it engages my glutes a little bit more, and I am guessing the reason most people do hip thrusts is to grow their glutes. So for me alone, I would definitely prefer a typical like horizontal hip thrust machine. But again, if you are wanting to save space, maybe go with the vertical design, but let me know what you think. Overall, I did like this machine. Let us know what you think about one, vertical design hip thrust machines, and then two, what do you think about the price of this one? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Lindsay with Garage Gym Reviews. Peace.